billion estimate, it's going to be probably at 1.5 by the time it's all done. So, anyway.
Well, it's a pipeline, so there will be environmentalist issues.
I'll supply it.
Actually, it's water, so it's not that bad.
Try it out first, see how it works.
But yeah, it is, yes. Yes.
It's going to cost some holy land somewhere.
There's permitting issues, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Shelby?
I'm very sensitive.
Wow.
That's why he's so red? Right now.
There we go.
Yeah, I really didn't.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's 4:30. I'd like to call the November 19, 2019 meeting of the Moorhead Public Service Commission to order. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Bruce, do I have a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. With regard to the consent agenda, I would like to remove item number 13. Councilwoman White would like that removed for discussion, so if anybody would like anything else removed, or are we okay with the rest? I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item 13.
I move to approve the consent agenda minus item number 13.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That gets us to customers to be heard. Recognitions. Mr. Schwant?
No recognitions at this time.
Cool. Not even of Mr. Knudsen's soft skin?
Soft-skinned Knudsen. He's got a new nickname.
Yeah. To all of you listening to this, this is predates the meeting, so ask Mr. Knudsen about his soft skin. Any old business? Mr. Ogala?
I have two items to review. I had the opportunity to join the Mayor for Coffee here approximately a month ago, and I found it very interesting, and I wanted to share some of those observations. Basically, what I mentioned, that I was there to hear from the people who were attending their concerns and issues with the utility. There were several people who commented here about rates and fees. Here specifically, there was a gentleman there that was running for one of the council positions, and he said most people that he spoke to had concerns about the rates and direction of the increases. There apparently also has been a significant discussion about the fees that the utility is charging and what they should be and if they should be reduced or not. That brings up concern here that obviously there's a lot of confusion with the users as far as what is utility, rates, and expenses versus city fees. We need to address that somehow. So the example that I was given, I'll give two. We're having trouble with the trash. Who at the utility should we call? You're not supposed to call the utility. It's a city issue. Well, it's on my bill. Also with the collection. Who at the utility do I need to call for my garbage collection? We don't handle garbage collection. So there has to be somehow something addressed with our billing process to clarify that. And I think that would also clarify the issues that you see about people when they complain about the bill and how high their utilities are in the city of Moorhead. Because they look at the bill solely, and there's not a good understanding of the fees that's being charged versus the usage of the utility, water, and electricity. That came out very, very clear to me here. The next thing here that the mayor asked me about, or concern about, the increase in the rates that were proposed for the water. And he mentioned he would like to discuss that. My observation here is that with the council's comments about rates and fees, there is little discussion about the transfer amount. And Nancy, you might have to help me with this, but I believe the national average is about 5 to 8%. The city of Moorhead has anywhere from 20 to 22%, depending what you have. The reduction in fees that's being discussed has a minimal impact, comparing to the large transfer that's taken place. For an example, Moody's has cited an issue with the transfer for the utility to the city. FERC has cited an issue with the amount of transfer to the city. And if I remember correctly, and Nancy, please help me, that based on the transfer system that we have, the transmission system that we have, FERC has reduced the payment to the utility in a significant amount of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And Nancy, if you can recite the approximate amount of what was requested and what was approved, it is a huge amount of money. So if we had more national averages, we would have a significant amount of increase in those dollars. And Nancy, if you would please recite those.
Nancy Lund, Admin and Finance Manager. The numbers are a little stale in my mind right now, but right now the reimbursement we get from Southwest Power Pool for transmission costs or the use of our transmission system for taking power from one area to another, I think we currently get about $2.2 million for that. I believe the original request that we had in to SPP for reimbursement for those costs was more in the range of about, I think it was 3.8 million. It was the number. And they denied that request based on that large city transfer. They didn't think that was appropriate to include that in the calculation, and they came back and offered a number closer to the 2.2 million. So a very significant decrease in that transmission cost reimbursement to us due to that transfer calculation.
Thank you, Nancy. So I can appreciate discussion about lowering fees, and that has a very minimal impact on the total cost to the user. So it is concerning to me that the transfer is continuing increasing. Now there's discussions at the council level about how there's concerns about the rates and being competitive, and how the average person is not being supported or being given competitive pricing and fees. So when you're talking about competitive pricing and fees, and when you have a 20% transfer rate, and that's not being discussed, I don't think that's fair to the utility. The other item that is concern to me is that I'm looking at a number of emails that's being sent to our manager from staff requesting changes or policy changes, which I don't believe is his position. It should be the commission's responsibility to do that. So I'd like a clarification as far as from our council rep. Who does the city council believe Bill reports to?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Who?
So what were the requests? So MPS staff has been sending requests to
No,
Bill?
city staff has been requesting Bill to do some changes of fees and policy. That's a commission's responsibility. It's not Bill's. So what I'm observing, this happened similar to the EDA, when the EDA had their staff person. That's city staff were directing employees that they didn't employ of duties they should perform. I don't think that's appropriate. So I would like to have just some better understanding or clarification that Bill reports to the commission. So when there's requests to be made, they should be coming to the president or the commission for any policy changes.
So you have things that weren't sent to Dave and that were only sent to Bill? Is that what you're?
Well,
I have no idea what you're talking
That's
about.
how I'm interpreting some of the emails that are
But
being
Dave
sent
was
out.
never included in any of this?
who wasn't?
Dave, the
Commissioner?
chair,
Well, I mean,
saying that so that the
I
chair
think-
of the commission was never included in any of it?
well, probably the understanding is back at the city to make sure that understand that Bill will have to bring everything to the commission. I don't have the authority to do certain things that are asked. So, I mean, it may be that, I mean, I think it's a reminder to me as well to make sure and bring the commission in on all these decisions that are going to be made. We're doing a lot of back and forth on, the billing issues that you brought up. I mean, the top half of the bill is electric and water. Of course, we bring those all to you. Bottom half of the bill is city services, all those fees that you talked about. We're working on, billing changes. The city has a new finance manager. She's got a lot of changes that she would like. Some of those are administrative, but if it's anything to do with fees or where the fee goes or fire service fee, fire capacity fee, whatever those are, that's a commission decision on if that's listed, where it goes, all that kind of stuff.
So I just want to make sure there's a good understanding, clarification.
Yeah, I guess I'm still not clear what you're asking me to find
Well-
out from the commission, or from
Well,
the
council.
council.
Well, is
Yeah.
it your understanding that Bill reports to the commission?
Yeah,
Okay, all right. And I'm assuming that's the whole council's interpretation then
yeah.
that as well, too.
Yeah, and I think the
Okay.
city manager too, but so if your objection is that if they haven't been communicating with I agree with Bill. I think that if they are communicating with Bill, so when Bill comes and presents at the meeting, I think we assume that he would communicate that with the rest of the commission. And so I apologize. I know that you presented and maybe Dave wasn't at that meeting, but
So
yeah.
that's a good clarification. And again, the reason I'm bringing this up is because it reminds me of the situation that happened at the EDA, and that concerns me.
and I don't know what that situation
Okay, well,
is.
we can visit more clear
Sure.
afterwards if you like.
And I did try and make it real clear that night when I presented to the council. I said, look at chapter 12 of the charter. I report to the commission. The commission, provides services as outlined in the charter. And they do an excellent job. And so water and electric service is under the commission's authority as outlined in the charter. So I tried to make that real clear a couple times because when I'm up in front of the council, I think some council members probably think that, I'm another city staffer. And there probably is a little bit of confusion because everybody needs an education when they come onto the council or the commission as to how that operates. I report to the commission. I don't report to the city manager like a lot of the other, all the other department directors. So,
But I would say in that respect, though, I mean, just even though MPS operates in some ways more independently, but we all still are part of the city of Moorhead. And we
Right.
need to work together.
that's right. And under the charter, it outlines how we operate, and we do operate independently. That's what people sometimes don't understand.
And the final item here is that it's my understanding that in the past that there was I'll call it the council of the past commissioners that was used as a resource to the existing commission that could bounce off ideas or discuss any policy changes or whatever the case may be. I think that would be valuable for the commission that we would have now to reinstate that. And I'm not quite sure of all the details, but it's not unusual to have different boards. Like the MSU Foundation Board has now looked to past Foundation Board members and invited them to participate in some of their meetings and that sort of thing. So I think it's a valuable tool for any board to use or commission group to use. So just if staff would research that and see how that was done and then report back.
Is that the group of four, basically two commissioners, something different? Okay.
It's former commissioners.
Oh,
to
former.
help existing commissioners, and I think that's a good idea for continuity as well. Right, as we change and people come on, people leave, I think it would be a good idea maybe to have somebody say, hey, I've been there. So we're basically looking for old commissioners.
Okay.
Not too old, though.
That sounds good. No, that sounds good.
That's it? Thank you, Mr. Regala. From City Council?
Oh.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, could we talk about a few of the things that
Yeah.
John brought up?
Absolutely.
I had one question. You mentioned questions that people had about the billing. I mentioned this at another meeting. Would this be a place where, because one of the things that we've been talking about is how do we better educate people? Because I realize this as a fairly new person. It is confusing, trying to sort out some of the billing issues. And this is where I would say, again, if there is not, obviously opportunities where people can come to the meetings, one thing, but would we be able to put together some kind of a video that we could have on the webpage that, if people have questions about their billing? Because sometimes reading through a lot of text for some people is just, it doesn't work very well. So having something like that you could, I mentioned when we had the PowerPoint slides before, having something like that with audio to it, you can save that to a video and put it on the webpage. And that might be something that would be helpful for consumers just to, to be able to click on that. So. And then the other question I had is you brought up the transfer, and, I do appreciate that. And I know that in the budget this year, Bill, I asked you some questions about it, but my understanding, because you said, John, you said that the transfer percentage continues to increase, and
And the percentage.
okay, but beyond what was agreed upon. So I guess this is what I'm trying to figure out is that I've speaking with other commissioners, I understand that this was a challenging issue in the past, but I thought that they'd worked out an agreement and that we have been trying to be mindful and work within that. And so has something changed beyond the agreement?
Oh, the agreement, everybody agrees, and we had an agreement
Okay.
that works really well. So the amount goes up because that's what we agreed every year. The percentage goes up as well because our revenue is flat or goes down.
Okay.
But I think the point that maybe John was trying to make is when people sit up here, all who sit up here have to be mindful of the fact when we say the utility does this or utility does that, that we're all mindful of the fact of the other things the utility does or doesn't do. And I think that's maybe what gets lost once in a while.
Yeah. But the issue of the transfer, right? That's what
Yeah,
I was.
the transfer's fine.
Right now, we're still in compliance with
Yep.
what we've agreed to
Absolutely.
in the past. Okay.
And that wasn't my attempt to change that or argue the fact. That has been successful, and it's worked very well. But my point is that in the future, if there is going to be discussions about concerns about rate increases that the utility has to put in place for infrastructure, and then there is no discussion about the impact about the transfer amount, that is a skewed discussion, in my opinion. Is you got to talk about both impacts, and this transfer amount has a significant more impact on the rates than the fees that the utility charges for late charges or hookup or rehookup or whatever the case may be here. So I just want to make sure that we have a clear understanding that there's more of a significant impact on rates. And you can look for the businesses, and if you want to go out to Ag Bush and Pactiv and talk to them about their concerns, we're getting more and more pushback about corporate competitiveness in the country, not just Moorhead. And that is a concern that I have, that we need to maintain competitiveness for our businesses.
I agree, and I would welcome that discussion too, of even just getting council and commissioners together. I think a lot of the council would be happy to just look at what are we doing to make sure that we are competitive, that we're, this is a great time for Moorhead, we're seeing growth, and we don't want to do anything that would jeopardize that. And I know we hear that continually through discussions at council, and I hear you talking about it, so maybe this would be a time to just make sure that we're all, on the same page and not missing any opportunity to do whatever we can to put our best foot forward for growth in Moorhead.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have said for a long time that from a utility perspective, I mean, we are on board. Whatever we can do to push growth, we are on board. But we have our fixed cost, right? I mean, we have our fixed costs from all sides, and there's not much left over afterwards.
And I think we have talked about this before between Moorhead Public Service Commission and the City Council. We're on the same team. And so, like at the last council meeting, they were talking about the auditing services, and we'll talk about that later. But then there was a mention that Moorhead Public Services is not efficient. And I took offense to that because it's like, number one, why is the council saying we're not efficient to everybody at home? Because if we're on the same team, then don't hack away at our reputation by saying we're not efficient. And I'm not sure where that comes from, but if you look at any benchmark of Moorhead Public Service, we are very efficient. Our rates are competitive, and we provide over $9 million annually to the city through the transfer. And the transfer is 4 times the national average. So instead of, Moorhead Public Service providing, $2.5 million, we're providing $9 million. If you want us to look much more efficient and have very, very competitive rates, lower the transfer to the national average. Now, we know that's not possible, because the transfer has been established over a number of years, and we provide lots of resources to the city, but don't throw us under the bus and say we're not efficient. We're not going to take that well. And that doesn't sound like a very good team effort. So, we're all on the same team. Let's talk well of each other. Let's not say Moorhead Public Service is not efficient when we work very hard to be efficient, and our employees do an excellent job at being efficient. So that's, I think, a little bit of what John is talking about as well. So the transfer agreement is in place. We're following. We're all in compliance. But recognize that we're 4 times the national average. And if you're going to talk about us not being efficient, let's lower the transfer. We're going to look great. But again, it's not really possible. So anyway, that's my soapbox.
Yeah, and I will, since, again, I can't speak for all the council members, and I don't recall somebody saying that, and I apologize if was the wording, because I think I can say that our council, our mayor, we value Moorhead Public Service. I think, and you'll see this through the things that I've asked for some things off consent, and I'm going to bring up some things that were brought to my attention. We're always looking for how we can do things better, and I would say that we're doing that within the work that we do, and we need to be held accountable. And and that's, I feel like my job is, when I hear things, to bring it here too. So, but it doesn't mean that we don't value the good work that we're doing. It's just with anything, always trying to see where we might be able to do things a little bit better. So. So I would hope, I really do want to convey that intent, so. Thanks, John.
Did you have anything else, or?
No, for now.
Public Service Commission, anything from you guys? We've heard from you, John, so you're done for today. No, just kidding. What do you got? No. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Joe Manager, you got?
Yeah, on the note of the Budget Committee, Commissioner, or the customers out there can still provide comments on the water rate increase and then those fee changes. We've had a few informal comments from people just talking, but nothing real formal on that. So I just wanted to bring that up. There is a number of things in the General Manager's report. There's a third quarter update. Sometimes when you look through those, there might be some questions. There's also some a presentation in there about bill payment options. And again, back to the education of everyone out there, we kind of put that out there, and we actually could throw that up on the screen and have Mark Moylan come up here and talk about some of those bill payment options if you want. Otherwise, we are going to probably talk about that on December 3rd. It's 3rd, right? Yep, December 3rd. Talk about some customer service things that we're doing at our planning meeting. So again, but it is in the General Manager's report if you're interested in throwing it up there and talking about it. Otherwise, we'll wait until December 3rd. Okay, we'll wait.
Yeah, go ahead.
Clarification, Bill. I had looked at a couple of different spots, and has the discussion about not charging for credit card usage been tabled at this point, or is it still on the plan in the budget?
The not charging for credit card use is, we're waiting for our counterparts at the city to respond to see if they want to do the same thing, because as we have been talking about, we're tied together on the bill. So it's a larger portion for Moorhead Public Service, but it's a fairly large portion for the city as well, and we're not going to absorb those we're not going to pay for the city of Moorhead's credit card fees if we excuse credit card fees. So we're waiting for them. As you know, there's a number of fees that we're reducing. That was one fee we were going to eliminate. But again, we're waiting on the city to respond, and we're not going to absorb their portion. And I'm thinking that our portion is about $60,000 annually? Okay, 60,000 total, maybe 2/3 Moorhead Public Service, 1/3 the city. So it'd be 20,000 of theirs that they would have to absorb, 40,000 that our ratepayers would have to absorb. So we're ready to go. About 54% of the public power utilities across the nation do absorb them. So it's about 50-50, probably growing, because I think more and more are looking at it, probably for the same reason we are, because customers don't understand why do you charge me for a credit card payment? Well, we've done some more research on that, and a lot of people say you should charge for credit cards on a reoccurring payment like this, a utility type payment, not a purchase of an item. So we are still open to the commissioner's thoughts on that. We've actually talked to Nancy, and her staff have talked to the bank, and they advised against absorbing those fees. We've talked to other utilities, and again, 50% of them are absorbing them, and 50% of them are charging a convenience fee, just like we do. And also the city, if you go and sign up for a park program or something like that, they've got a convenience fee for those purchases as well. So it seems like we're just kind of right there on that decision. We haven't made the decision yet. We'll bring that back to you, because that should be your decision. I'm not sure how we've got it in the budget. I think we've got it in the budget to absorb it. So.
I guess from my experience in the industry, you have to make a clear distinction between a purchase and accounts payable payment. And I think that would give us clarification of how we should go forward.
Sure.
Related to that, and that's my soapbox, is how many of our customers get their bills electronically?
It's about 25%.
Okay, so for 75% of our customers, we still send out paper bills.
Right.
I think that should be another one where we try to reduce our costs, because it costs us, what does it cost us to send out a bill? $1?
I'm not going to answer that question.
You're not gonna
Nancy
answer
would
that?
have to answer that question.
Because it's what, $7,000 a month or something that we pay actually for bills to be sent out. So I think those two should go hand in hand, right?
Yep.
I mean, if we waive somebody's credit card fee, right, they should agree to an electronic bill, because that reduces our cost on the billing side as well. So I
Yep.
think those two need to be somewhat connected. I mean, I don't personally, except for the Clay County, property tax bill, I don't get anything paper anymore. It's all electronic.
Yep.
So there's no reason why we couldn't, incentivize our customers to do the same. And it saves trees.
Yep. And we are looking at incentives. We'll bring that back to you sometime. I don't know when, but probably early in 2020.
Because I've only talked about it for about 4 years.
You're only what?
I've only talked about it for about 4 years. So take your time.
Yeah, right.
I would agree with you on that one, Ralph. An electronic, absolutely, because there's so few things that I know I don't get paper bills for. MPS, actually. I didn't know electronic was an option.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And we're talking.
Guilty, publicly. I'll change it tonight, yeah.
Well, and we're talking with other utilities too to see what they're doing, so we're not reinventing the wheel. So on the incentives, and there's a variety of ways to do it. We've done incentives before, and you got to do it, the right way, so you get the right customers that you want to have do that. There's going to be paper bills for some people forever, but yeah.
But not for 75%.
Right. Well, that is probably about the industry average. I think we're close to that, but I know you don't like me to say industry average, but.
It's not an average utility, so
Yep,
don't come
yep.
with averages.
That's right. Regional leader. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then there is the Holiday Lights Parade next Tuesday. Moorhead Public Service employees have a float. It'll be a big line truck with a a big trailer, and you're invited to ride along if you want. There's not a lot of probably work that you'll have to do besides maybe toss some candy if you want to walk alongside it. But next Tuesday, we'll be doing that. Sometimes we've had a commission meeting on that Tuesday, so it's lining up out here when we start, but this time we're not. And I think it's about the same time. I think it's around that 5 o'clock time.
Does all the candy have to be tossed, or does some have to be quality checked?
Some has to be quality checked. We do good candy, so. Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you, Bill. Item number 9, I'm not going to say it. I'm sorry, item number 11, sorry. I'm so excited. Chris, are you going to talk to that? The bid for the lime sludge dewatering facility. Here I go, I did say sludge.
Chris Knutson, Water Division Manager. So just a brief history. We've talked a lot about sludge in the past few years, but this is kind of a big moment in terms of our development of a long-term plan for our lime sludge. So just remembering kind of what's the source of sludge and why are we here looking at a lime sludge dewatering facility. So we use lime softening to remove hardness from the water, and one of the byproducts of the lime softening process is lime sludge. And for a long time, we've basically put this lime sludge into ponds. Back in 2015, MPCA notified us that we could no longer continue to do that without some regulatory action on our part. Since that time, we've really kind of investigated a number of options. One of the options that we settled on was actually constructing a lime sludge dewatering facility. So basically taking the liquid sludge, compressing it into a cake, and then hauling that sludge off to either a landfill or someplace that we could land apply the sludge. We've worked on design of this facility for about the past year, and staff has really taken a concerted effort toward cost reduction as much as we can, make it as efficient and economical a facility as we can. And with that being said, we just recently bid the project on November 5th. Had 4 very competitive bids in my mind. We were just slightly below the estimate for the project. So we had an estimate of about $6.5 million. The low bid from Swanberg was about 1.5% below the estimate. So good bids. And then for our total budget, you'll notice on the second page, we had a total budget of $7 million for 2019. The construction cost, it's about $6.4, but we also have a number of design fees associated with the project. So the total project projected cost is around $7.125, or about 1.8% over that $7 million mark. So took as many efforts as we could to really reduce cost on the project. It's a substantial cost, but really kind of necessary to secure our future with respect to disposal of lime sludge residuals moving into the future. So looking forward to hopefully being able to construct the facility. Got good bids, and we're recommending award tonight.
So that's for a reminder too, this is not something we want to do, this is something we have to do.
Yeah.
And Chris, remind us, so you have a $7 million expense here. What's your annual revenue?
Over $9 million.
For the water? What, 9 million?
Yeah.
So this is a huge expense on the water
It
side,
is.
and if the mayor does want to talk about a 6% increase, we'd be happy to discuss that, obviously. Just so you know, it's not something you want to do, something we have to do, and we got some good bids, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. It's nice to be within, very close to the estimated cost. So again, took a lot of effort. We'll be self-performing some of the work associated with the project, just to reduce our total cost. So some of the underground work for the project will actually, MPS crews will actually be performing that work. So really try to get as creative as we could to keep that cost down.
Please.
Just a quick question, looking toward the future. Are there other options for these blocks of sludge than a landfill?
There are, and it's not a closed story. So, the landfills is probably the best option, but we're still looking into land application of these solids. So we actually did a study in 18 looking at the feasibility of land application of these solids, and we've actually talked to some contractors that's what they do for a living. They land apply biosolids and lime solids. So it is feasible and possible to land apply these solids. The big cost from our standpoint would be we have to get them to about the Wadena area to land apply it. So the soils around this area are just not conducive to land application, which differs than the wastewater side. The wastewater side, they actually do apply one of the solids that they produce, biosolids. They land apply those locally here. But because of soil conditions, we would have to go to about Wadena to land apply it. With all that being said, there's still really two options on the table: landfill, land application. It'll be a cost. It'll really come down to cost. If we can make the land application cost competitive, it's possible and or likely that we would pursue that option.
So right now, the landfill's the best option.
In my estimation, yes.
Okay, thank you.
The facility no matter what, right? Whether we apply.
Yeah, a good point. The facility is necessary no matter which way we go, because essentially what we're doing with this facility is taking something that's really liquid and form, producing a cake that can easily be transported, whether we take it to a landfill, take it to some field to land apply. It's got to be in a cake form.
Anything else, guys? Anybody like to entertain a motion to award the bid? We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, we got ourselves a lime sludge dewatering facility. Yay. Chris, while I had you up here, I want to thank you and your team. I understand we had in the 21st and 21st underpass area, we had a little land slippage that happened on a construction site. It ripped open our water main, the 20-inch or 24-inch water main. And you guys were able to keep the pressure up, so we did not have to sanitize the system, and nobody in the city of Moorhead had to boil their water. So one of those little things, talk about efficiency of a utility here. We were able to use our high service pumps. I think we used them all at the same time for the first time ever.
Yeah, so just a little bit more context. You did a good job introing it. Basically, in the 21st Street project, one of the components of the project under the city's contract was relocation of both the river transmission line, which we used to get river water to our water treatment plant, and then a 20-inch finished water transmission line. So there was a relocation effort for both of those lines as part of the city contract. Within several weeks, one of the slopes on the project failed, thus causing the water main adjacent to that slope to separate. When that water main separated, it induced a high water demand condition, such that, as Ralph mentioned, we basically had to turn on all of the 4 pumps in our high service pump station and ended up putting about 1 million gallons out of that pipe. You might think, well, geez, let's not put water, let's reduce the amount of water we put in there. We actually have to keep a certain threshold for pressure within our distribution system. And if we don't meet that threshold, we'd have to have a boil water order within the city. So with the proper staff did an excellent job responding. They were able to keep the pressures within the system within compliance and at an adequate level. So I can't thank staff enough for their efforts. But also, talking about investment in infrastructure, the high service pumping station really paid dividends that night. We would not have, in my estimation, been able to maintain compliance without it. So one of the reasons we do replacement of infrastructure that needs it for sure. So really a great combination of staff effort along with good infrastructure.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Yep.
And again, thanks to the team. That was a great thing. And I'm sure the contractors loved the 1.1 million gallons of water in the construction site, but that's what we have pumps for, right? Item number 13. So that's the item we took off the consent agenda. We were to approve the auditing services with Eide Bailey. Nancy?
Yeah, Nancy.
So the item we have before you is to approve auditing services with Eide Bailey. Late in the summer, the city of Moorhead put out an RFP for auditing services. We participated in that RFP process with them. They actually did all the work, collected the RFPs. Those were presented to me and my staff reviewed those, and we selected Eide Bailey based on the firm size, utility experience, and continuity of auditing services. So those were important factors to us, although Eide Bailey wasn't the lowest provider, and that was known early in the audit process that cost was not the single factor that would be looked at. We've selected Eide Bailey to continue our audit services with your blessing for the next 5 years.
And the city is not using Eide Bailey, I assume?
I do not know where the city's at in their process yet. So we moved forward. We needed to get something in place. We do normally start some preliminary audit processes late in November and early in December, so we need to get those processes running. I'm not sure where the city's at on their process. It was out of the same, I mean, they're looking at the same bid proposals that we looked at also.
So Deb, you had a question on the process?
Yeah, so this is one of those places where, again, I think we generally agree that we value Moorhead Public Service, but the part of the discussion has been places where there's been questions that have come up about if things are duplicative and if there's ways that we can save some money. And I think that we're all, I think we could all agree that that's valuable. And so this came up, and in my understanding from the email exchanges that I read, and from conversations with city staff, is that in the past we've always done these together, right? That the city has to do an audit, and MPS is part of the audit that the city does. And so I think that serves your purposes, but serves our purposes. And in my understanding, and it's different from what I'm hearing here and what I'm reading, is that the city put out the bid and sent the list of the 5 and asked to have that narrowed down to 2, and under the assumption that we were going to do it together, and MPS decided to do their own. And so that's why I'm wondering, because we still will have MPS in our audit. It's required that you're in the audit. So now there'll be 2 audits of MPS, and I'm trying to understand why that would happen, and why would we be spending money on 2 audits when we only need to be spending money on 1 audit?
I don't think there'll actually be 2 audits, so the audited numbers from Moorhead Public Service will be incorporated into the city's financials. And as I talked with city staff earlier in the process, there may be a little bit of information that the city's auditor, if they choose someone different, may want to come down and work with MPS staff a little bit, but there won't be any extra costs incurred. So those financial numbers are fed into the city's financial report.
And
Right.
Nancy, there's 2 audits
That's
now. There's an audit of Moorhead Public Service, and there's an audit of the city.
Yes.
So there's 2 right now.
Yeah. In the past, the city does their audit, MPS has their audit. The output from the MPS audit is just a data file is incorporated into the city financial statements. So,
Yeah, that's not what we're hearing at all. So I have our fellow council member. So again, we're under the understanding that we'll be paying for an audit that for the city that will include you, and because they've selected a different auditor, and that now Eide Bailey will also be paid. So we're hiring 2 different auditing firms to do this, and so we will have costs with both of them, which just seems unnecessary.
if the RFP was followed correctly, the wording in the RFP says that the commission requests proposals, for auditing services. So we addressed the commission's side of those. I didn't see anything in the documents that said the city had to incorporate MPS into their audit. That wasn't clearly,
My understanding
it
is
was.
that MPS is always in their audit.
So, but I heard there's 2 audits.
It's
audits.
two
It's a
pieces. There's
separate
2
audit.
components to
Yeah.
it. So there's a city cost and there's an MPS cost. And so that's the way the proposal has always been. There's 2 components. And so this year we selected our own component. That should have been like an option in the city's proposal. So they would just select that without the commission piece in there.
Yeah, and when I spoke with the city manager about this, and I know she consulted with our finance director, I asked if if MPS is now doing their own, does this mean that we pay less with ours? And no, it's still the same, we're still doing the same thing, and it's just now, we'll have the added cost. And so when I looked at the email, I don't know if I should.
Well, is that correct? So I hear, Heidi, do you want to
Yeah.
talk quick? Sorry, go ahead.
Yep. Heidi Duran, City Council Ward 2. I'm just here to help clarify and to reiterate what Deb was saying. The information that we have received is that the auditor that MPS has selected is not the same as what the city is going to use. There are additional costs, upwards of $12,000, that will have to be picked up by our ratepayers and our taxpayers, because the utility is choosing to use a separate auditing company versus using the same auditing company that the city is using.
Is the auditing company, so the city has decided on an auditing company?
We had gotten information from Clifton Lawson Allen. Yep, and that was the auditing company that the city is. I don't believe that we have secured their services as of formally yet, but that is the company that we're looking at. And I also know that something else that we were informed of by this particular company is that it's recommended that cities and utilities don't use the same auditing company every year, because you want a fresh look and you want fresh eyes, and you don't want eyes that have seen everything before and that maybe, I don't want to use the word take for granted, but make assumptions. You want fresh eyes. And John, maybe you can speak to that, being in the accounting field for as long as you've been in. Sometimes a fresh perspective is something that can be a good thing. But I'm just here to reiterate that that is the information that we have been given. And that council is it's not just Deb and I. The entire council is concerned that we're duplicating services, and that would be, definitely an inefficient use of time, staff, money, ratepayers' money.
I mean, the direct response is then, well, pick the same auditor that we have had for years, right? If you guys don't want to duplicate, stay with the same auditor, but that's a different discussion.
Well, but remember though, the concern is that if you use the same auditor years and years and years, you're more likely to miss something than if you have fresh eyes that are looking over everything.
I've taken a number of companies public, and we have had no issue with that. I mean, we're not talking about a small Ralph's auditing firm. You're talking, generally well-known regional and national firms. But I get your point. So, but you guys have not decided yet on which auditing firm. Nancy, is there a need for us to decide today to go with Eide Bailey? You said there's some pre-work that has to be done. Is there a need for us to decide today to go with Eide Bailey?
There is some pre-work that usually starts late in November that we would like to get started on, and as far as some confirmations go and things like that, and get that process in the works. The other comment I have on that, on the two separate ones too, a couple things come to mind there. Heidi talked about the fresh eyes are good for things too. On the other side of it, on the bond rating side of things, when you switch auditors, it raises questions on the bond rating side of things about why are they doing this? Have they had some disagreements with their auditors? Are they hoping the new auditors won't find it, and things like that too? So there's pros and cons to each of those arguments. And as I view these RFPs, just like in a bid where you might have a bid and you might have alternate A and alternate B and alternate C, the way I saw this RFP set up is that we were like an alternate A, which could be accepted or rejected. So I wasn't aware that it was a take-all process. So we looked at it as you can add on MPS or not. And it shouldn't have changed the main bid on the city's audit. They were listed as two separate audit numbers. So you should be able to unbundle that and take the city audit or take the MPS one.
Heidi, you're done.
Thanks, Ralph, sorry, Chair.
I'm very formal here. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I try to be, but I don't do a very good job at it. Anyway, I guess I would maybe recommend, I don't think there's a reason why MPS couldn't start doing some of that work and maybe delay selecting a company, and that way you all would have some more time to get some information from Bill and the city manager that has been exchanged that maybe, I don't know, maybe you all haven't seen it, or, you know, you can pour over it again in collaboration with Deb or I or Chris, city manager Volkers. But in the meantime, you can still continue to do some of that groundwork that you need to do. I mean, because the optimum, the overall goal is to save money. We you know, if we can save $15,000, it might not make us, you know, it might not build a sludge processing facility, but it's $15,000.
Right.
Well, I mean, the concern I have, there's a timing issue, but I'm not that concerned about that. I'm more concerned about, we need somebody who understands our business, right? Our business is different than other businesses, and as is yours, totally understand that. So we don't want to end up with somebody who doesn't understand that. But I totally agree with the cost-saving side of things. What I don't understand, what I really don't understand is why we're here at this point and there's questions about the bidding process, right? So somebody is not talking. Sorry. Option A, option B, alternate A, alternate B, why is this coming up at this point, right? Why hasn't it been discussed beforehand? And I'm not pointing finger at anybody. I am, but not generally, right? That's the kind of stuff, talking about city manager and talking about our manager, talking, getting stuff done, right? That is, I'm sorry, that's unacceptable. So somewhere in this process of going through an RFP, it was not clear what we are looking for, and now it comes up, right? And I'm sorry, now we are going to look at the bad guys again because we are trying to approve an auditor who we need or that we need, and we are now going to be saying, well, you know, we didn't follow process. And this is not the first time. Sorry.
I just wanted to share, because I can't speak to every incident, but in this case, I'm looking at the email exchange here. And it does appear in this case that the finance director was trying to work at having us work together on this. And so I'm looking at the email that was from October 2nd, and initially it was not our intention to select someone different. It was actually on October 2nd, she sent 5 possibilities and asked for your feedback, asked for MPS feedback to say, which one of these would you like? We'd like to narrow it down to 2 to bring them in. And the response was, after reviewing the proposals, the commission will engage with their own audit services. Thank you for including MPS in the RFP process. So, I mean, we thought we were going to work together on this, and then we're told, no, we're doing our own thing. And so we hadn't actually even narrowed it down to 2. We were asking for feedback so that we could work together on it. And then when Heidi and I read this, my first question was, when did this come to the commission? Because it mentions the commission in it, but I assumed maybe it had been a decision that was made before I came on board. But this is what was sent to the finance director.
Yep, and I get it. And it's October 2nd, today is November 19, right? That's a month and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Bill, I don't know who was
No,
responsible
I mean-
or should have responded to something, but it would have been nice to know. I mean, we talked earlier about the fact that the way we're set up is this commission runs the utility, right? That's you are our general manager, absolutely. So let us know about these things, right? It's 6 weeks later, and we're sitting here in a situation where, you know, I think we should table this decision, but it needs to be, we need to get better at this. We, plural.
Yep.
To get better at this.
Team.
Team. Chris, sorry.
I'm trying to understand the timing of these events. So there was an RFP and then this email exchange. Am I skipping any steps yet?
No, I don't think so.
So we have the RFP, then we have this chain
Right.
of emails, or this
Yeah.
email exchange, and not a chain, but an exchange. And then the city picks somebody and we pick somebody, is that what I'm understanding?
So what I can see from the email exchange, this is on October 2nd, is it went out with 5 options, and the request to MPS was to select, to give their recommendations on their, on them, because I can read it if you want.
Oh, it's
if that
okay.
help- Because they'd like to bring in 2 for interviews.
Okay.
Okay, so at that point, assuming that we're all going to work on this together, and so the request was, what would you like? So that we could narrow it down, and the response was, we're going to do our own thing. And so that was on the 22nd.
But you've decided on your audit.
But so we didn't until after that.
Okay,
So
and
we
you
hadn't
Are
picked,
going with.
so then,
Are
my
they the
understanding, yeah.
Are they the least?
And so, this is really awkward for me, because as I said, I'm just sort of repeating,
Yeah.
sharing the information. But for us on the council, we're just, as I said, we're just bringing to your attention because we need to be responsive to the people in the community, and we're not happy about this either, so.
Now,
Was that group the least expensive that you picked? The
It was
auditing?
less expensive than Ide Bailey.
We're-
But even in the, I will say on, that we did, in this, Carla said, she did say you didn't have to pick the least expensive one, but I'd like to narrow the field down. Let me know who you recommend for your top 2 firms, and of course, cost is not the only factor in making our choices, but we ended up going with the less expensive one.
And if I could,
Please.
it would be ideal if we could look at the companies together, because I agree with you, Ralph, that MPS is a completely different beast than the city, and that there's a lot of different stuff going on with the utility versus the city. And I don't want to put words in our finance director's mouth, but I think was her intent, was to talk to you all and get your feedback on a company that would fit the utility needs. And to Nancy's point, Nancy, I understand your point completely. If you flip-flop between auditors every year, that it doesn't look good. I think that I agree with that it doesn't look good to change auditors every year, but maybe every 5 years or every 6 years or so is probably a good timeline to look at fresh eyes. But so I wasn't trying to imply that you should have a different auditing company every year.
Right.
So I apologize
Let's
if
have that
that's.
conversation. Yeah.
A couple things just jump out on me is that apparently the email chain has been provided to the council members, but I don't know if there's a commissioner who's received that.
Maybe Dave has, I don't know.
And that,
I don't think
Why?
I've seen that either.
why, if there's this discussion that not a commissioner is involved in discussion, at least Dave or somebody. So I'm just going to have my say here. The second thing, Heidi, you had asked me as far as what my history is here for. So each auditing group would like to have the business. So they'll point out concerns and flaws of your existing here for it. So when they say it's good to have fresh eyes, I think we need to understand why that is. And then the point that Ralph had stated, that when you are having an audit and you have to look at who you have hired and what the firm is and what their reputation, how long they have been in the business. I don't think there's going to be any argument about the quality, because I believe Ide Bailey has done the city for some time. So the clarification that I would like to hear, it is, if my memory serves me correctly, in the past, the utility got a bill from Ide Bailey and a city got a bill from Ide Bailey for the audit. So they audited both different entities and billed us for that service. So if I'm hearing your explanation that the financial director is saying that your bid is going to be approximately 12 to 15,000 higher if we combine them together than what we've had in the past, is that an accurate statement?
No, I don't think that's what we were saying.
No.
Okay, so
The extra, or the increase would be if you choose your own, a different company than the city uses, there are 2 different agencies that have to be contracted, and therefore that cost increases.
Right.
And that my understanding is that there's a savings when you have the same company doing both entities. There's one contract and there's not a duplication of services.
Well, again, I don't understand why there's a thought there's a duplication, because there's been separate audit statements that are provided. So what I would like to see, and probably table it this time until it's clarified, what our previous billing history has been from Eide Bailey for the utility and the city, compare what we are getting now to see what is fact.
Right. And to see what true cost savings we could find.
That's-
By, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's what the council was hoping for. And I would imagine every taxpayer and every ratepayer out there would want us to do the same, is save as much money as we can while.
I wholeheartedly agree with
Yeah.
that. So, and I think it's good
I
that
figured-
our representatives from the council brings that to the attention of the commission, since we were not aware of this until we have an agenda item that's being consented for approval.
Right. I appreciate you all being open to working more collaboratively on this process. I thought you would be. So I appreciate you being open to that.
So you're welcome. I mean, that's one team, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, totally overlooked you.
No, I would completely agree with the idea of tabling it and bringing the commission up to speed and working collaboratively with the city, because we are looking at the same people as far as customers and consumers. And I do feel like I'm kind of out of the loop on some of this stuff. And so I would really appreciate some time in being brought up to where we need to be with some background information. Absolutely.
I think what Deb and I could do is to contact Chris, and Chris will contact our financial director, and hopefully they'll get information out to you all, so you all have the same information that, and maybe, I don't want to put additional work on Chris or you, Bill, but perhaps, we can see some kind of compressed documents that show, pretty easily what we're looking at in the decision that we could make.
And like to a point you and I made before, I mean, we will rely on our staff to say, listen, this is a firm who can handle us or not, right? There's a cost aspect, but even your finance director, has told us that the cost is one aspect of it, but it needs to work. It needs to work for both parties. And then on the savings side, I've heard, over the last 6 months, I've heard all these things about savings, but I've never seen an actual number about things that says we are going to save X amount of dollars, and I'm very literal, right? German and attorney. I need a number. We're going to sell $12,000, and all of a sudden, maybe it's not $12,000, right? It's one audit or two audits, cute.
Let's get the facts. Yep.
But let's get the facts, right? And then let's figure out what's going to happen. And Nancy, apologies that I think we're going to table this maybe for 2 weeks. But let's get the facts together and figure out what's best for us and for the ratepayers, for the ratepayers and for us.
I just wanted to add one more thing in defense of Nancy, too, because I do think, listening to you, and some of this could be just miscommunication, misunderstanding about what one group's intent was and the other. And this is, to me, I'm new to council, fairly new, it's almost a year now. But, I hear these things of difficulties in the past, and I think we got some people that are, working really hard, and it's the process that has let them down. And so I think it's in our interest to look at how we can work on improving that. So, either improving lines of communication, so that, those things don't get in the way. So, because I just think I wouldn't want it to, whatever happened here, there was a breakdown, but I think it's a breakdown more in the process. And the best thing that we can do is be talking about this and figure out how we can do it better.
I mean, and to be very honest, right, there's no need to have this discussion in a public meeting. This should have been easily fixed beforehand, right? And it wasn't, so we'll fix it now. And as always, there's always two sides to a story, and we'll listen to both sides of the story.
Yeah. Thanks.
If it's so simple, then sorry about that. Is anybody willing to make a motion? Do we have a second for that? Second. I do believe tabling motion does not require any discussion, so it's just a plain vote. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
And we'll bring it back on the December 3rd.
December 3rd. Let's do December 3rd.
Yep.
December 3rd, if that works for the city, if you...
Well, and I do think you should remember, what it says in the agenda packet, that, the commission is an independent entity of the city. We have been doing an audit, together, but separately, two sections. and we'll go over all of that. And maybe the final reminder about switching auditors, I have been involved in a instance where an entity, Missouri River Energy Services, switched auditors. It didn't go well. They had to switch back. So I'm probably a little gun shy at switching auditors, especially when you've got a firm that's about the same price as what we were paying, local, regionally recognized, et cetera, et cetera. Finally, it's up to you.
Yep.
Because the audit is the board's audit of Moorhead Public Service and making sure that its financials are clear.
And that's why we're going to look at all the facts, and thanks for the input. You know, we look at all the facts, and then we'll go from there. By the way, I'm not worried about one firm doing two things. They have many walls they can build up, so I'm not worried about that piece. But let's get the facts, and then we'll decide. Sorry, Nancy, we'll delay your start a little bit, but we'll get her done. So far, so good. Let's go to item number 14, the big one. Who's going to talk, Nancy?
Nancy can enter this one. Start.
Following up our sludge discussion a few agenda items ago comes the topic of how we're going to pay for that sludge facility too. So we've got an issue before you to request to the mayor and the city council, who are responsible for the bonding that we need, to approve two things for us. First would be a 2020 bond sale early in 2020, and then the call-in retirement of the 2010C Build America bonds. So I wanted to maybe cover the call-in retirement of the 2010C bonds first. So back in 2010, we bonded with some taxable bonds, and as we near the retirement of some of those, I think there's about 6 years left on the bond issue. As we're looking at new issues and the possibility of refunding, interest rates are low. We might be able to save some money if we refund it and reissue and things like that. We spent a little bit of time looking at that, and then eventually settled on the fact that our reserves are full. We've met our level 1 reserves and our reserve policy, and the electric division does have about $6 million, and the water can find $1 million to actually retire about this $7 million of higher interest debt than the debt we're going to be taking on for our new projects. So the first piece of this is to save a lot of money by retiring $7 million in debt, mostly electric, a little bit of water. That's the first step. We have a proposed date on that of February 1st, 2020. We may need to go a little bit beyond that. Our financial advisor, Paul Steinman, is with Baker Tilly, is reviewing the timeline he needs to do that. So it may be a little bit beyond February 1st before we can do that retirement. So action one that we'll be asking the council to do, it'll take one council action. City Attorney John Shockley, who would handle this, says it's very simple action. It should get done. It will take several hours of time from Baker Tilly to get it done, and it will be done. So we'll save a lot of money there. I think the number was like $700,000 over the next 4, 5, 6 years by retiring that debt.
So one question on the reserves. If we take out reserves, do we in any way, shape jeopardize our reserves policy when we go out to bonding? Number one. Number two, we have set some money aside for the AMI stuff, which we are looking at for 2023, 22, 23. That was about, what, $5 to $10 million.
Correct. Those will not be jeopardized, so we'll still have reserves to pay for the AMI project in 2021 or 2022 or something. So we've got that reserved. And as we've talked about with our reserve policy before, what you'll see is some cycling up and down of the level of reserves, because we'll build reserves to do things like do the AMI project, the next big thing that we'll draw reserves down when we do that project. Then we'll start building them up again for like 2027 or 2028, where we'll pay cash for a new substation. So depending on when the city grows, depending on when we need to do that new substation, we'll start building those reserves for that. So you'll see the cycle up and down. So I think that's about $7 or $8 million out in 2027. So you'll see them go up and then draw down and then go up again too on the electric side. So we're in pretty good shape on reserves on the electric side. The water side is a little tougher, the dollars of reserves are pretty tight on the water side, and normally if we do end up with some excess reserves on the water side, we pour that into water main replacement the following year or the year after that. So we spend those reserves down pretty quickly by doing water main replacement and trying to get ahead of that.
So a short version is we pay back $7 million earlier and save $700,000 roughly.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So it should be a win-win. Should be a win for the ratepayers on both the electric side and the water side. And we'll still, our policy, our reserve policy will be in place. We also asked the question from our financial advisor, Paul Steinman, if we're going to go and bond about the same time we're paying these off, how will they view that? Are they going to think we're, pulling a fast one or doing whatever? And they said, no, they'll look at it just like a refunding. Interest rates are low. You're getting rid of that high interest debt. We're going to take on some new debt, but they'll see it in a positive light. So that should be a good process for us too. The other piece of this action that we'll be asking the mayor and the city council to approve would be the 2020 bond sale early in 2020. That bond sale is going to be about $14 million. The major components on that, or the infrastructure it's going to fund, are going to be the lime sludge dewatering facility, the south side water tower, some couple of years of water main replacement. So we're accelerating some water main replacement to keep ahead of the city's street rehab. So they've got an aggressive schedule next year for street rehab. It's going to take about an extra $1 million in water main replacement to keep up with that next year. So we've put that into the bond issue also. A couple of unique things we're doing with that bond issue is we're using the state of Minnesota's public facility offices. We're using their bond rating, and we're going to save about 20 basis points on an interest rate by doing that. So that's the first time we've done that. If you recall, on our other financing for some of our water projects, we've received low-interest loans from them for about 1%. So we've done that 2 times in the last 5 years. These projects don't qualify for that because it's new infrastructure, not replacement of infrastructure. Timing-wise, that question will come up. We tried since last spring, we planned on partnering and issuing bonds the same time the city did. The city is just in that process right now. And so we tried to do that together. We got into a crunch as far as projects went and timing on projects and bids. And, the bid that we're just approving tonight, the council won't approve until December 9th, I think. That'll come before the council. So we didn't want to get the sale of the bonds ahead of the bid and ahead of the time that we actually need the funding. So we're looking at February, possibly a couple months beyond that, to do that bond sale early next year. So timing-wise, I think my agenda item says it was going to cost about $5,000 more to do this separate issue. That was an early estimate from our financial advisor. I think his revised number is about $12,000 extra to do the separate issue. However, we're going to save about 2.5 months of interest expense, so that's a pretty substantial number. We'll shift that interest expense and save that cash in 2020. So we tried. We would have liked to have done it together, but at one point we had to let the city go ahead with what they were doing, and because they needed to get their timing done to get those sold before the end of this year, and so we will push ours out a few extra months.
And I think they got good interest rates. We don't know if the interest rates are going to go up or down by the time we bond. Could go either way. They talked about a crystal ball. You can't tell what those rates are going to be like. But it was good that the city moved ahead on theirs instead of waiting for us. And we're going to save $80,000 or so, spending 12, saving 80. So the delay doesn't hurt us from that standpoint. And we do generally do these always together. So.
Just for clarification, when you're referring to Baker Tilly, they were formerly Springstead, correct?
Springstead, right,
So
yep.
just a clear understanding here of who we're dealing with. Springstead has been an entity that we've used for many years.
And when we do this, it's all done under the city of Moorhead, so they're the taxing authority. They're you know, they're behind this bond issue, and it's their long-term financial advisor, and we do use City Attorney Shockley for the legal end of things, too.
So just clarification here. Did you say that we need approval from the city to pay off the bond early?
Yes, because the city is the issuing body for the bonds, so they have to actually take just a quick action to call those bonds, yes.
Okay, all right, okay. Then just, I guess brainstorming here a little bit. When you enter the bond market here, there are some advantages to have a larger bond issue than a smaller bond issue. So was there discussions about combining the $7 million with the proposed $14 million for a larger issue to have a lower rate or a more attractive product than paying it off? And because you can always prepay the bond, so if we did issue a $21 million bond versus $14 million and then have an option to prepay, would we not have more of an attractive product than what you're proposing here?
Let me back up a little bit. We are calling those bonds and retiring those, so we're not.
You could refinance them, though, with this new bond
Right.
issue.
Right.
So that's my question is, would it be more advantageous for us to look for a larger bond issue than prepaying with reserve money and refinancing, and then at the discretion later to prepay when you want to? Have we looked at that?
I would have to pass that by our financial advisor.
Because it's my experience that if you have a bigger package with the, what is our rating right now, AAA? And
AA3, yep.
And the previous one that I think you had a rating of B, BABs is what you're retiring?
Build America bonds, yep.
Yep. So I would think you would have an option to have a more attractive product, which would bring more bidders, which would and I do have concerns about the market for waiting from the visit with EDA. We're in a unknown territory a little bit, so the better package we can put together, it would seem to me, should be at least investigated.
I can talk through that with Paul. I think he felt even breaking it apart from the cities, because when we were with them, they had a couple, I don't remember the dollar amount of theirs, but it would have been a bigger package. They're all individual bond issues, but a bigger offering all at one time. His conversation then was that our, $14 million is sufficient to draw good interest in that and the purchase of those bonds. So I don't think he felt that was, going to be a negative by breaking it apart there. It's sufficient size to hold its own.
All right. Okay.
But I will ask those questions of him.
So if you ask questions, then if you approve it now, then that's too late for the answer.
Just contingent on any other follow-up questions with him, with our advisor.
Yep. No, absolutely. No, it's just a matter of what kind of action do we take tonight?
This has to be put to the city for approval so you can get it marketed in February. And you need to be
Yes.
prior,
Well,
at least by December.
yeah,
Number 9?
we need to start setting our schedule for selling the new bonds. For the retirement of the bonds, you could take that action and move forward with that. We could bring the other one back. I think we'd have time to do that.
But if we don't do retirement, do it John's way, then that wouldn't work, right? If we take that action, or would we just take the action to retire and not say how we're going to retire?
Retiring, well, no, I see what you're saying, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we could hold on both. It will
Can we
just
hold on
delay, it would delay the retirement if we decide to go down that road.
But we wouldn't get it in front of City Council until the 12th, until 12/9 anyway, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
if we have a meeting on the 3rd, we could make the
You done?
decision on the 3rd
Yes.
and then still get it to council on the 9th.
Yes. Yep, that would work.
I have a question. Do we have any anticipation that there's going to be a problem with this? Is the city your conversation, your gut reaction? I mean, is the city going to give us any issue over this?
The city has asked us to consider waiting till next fall to do it jointly with their issue again and use reserves to fund these large projects between now and then. And I don't think the water has enough reserves to do that. Again, the water is a pretty small utility. These are $14 million worth of projects. Our reserves are probably about $3 million, so we would be into our reserve policy fairly quickly if we were going to consider that. They asked good questions, why couldn't we get things done, to do it jointly with them? And we tried. I mean, we tried on the water tower issue, we tried on the sludge, but it was more important for us to do a good job on those bids and get good prices and good contracts than to rush the projects and not get good bids.
Sorry.
Just tying in with that, I'm glad that I know I saw you mention it in here. That question came up, and I was even one of the ones that commented on it because they were asking why why we weren't able to do it at the same time, and what was the added cost for that. And I saw that you included that in the information. I think that would be really valuable to present any numbers that you have that show what the savings would be by, obviously there's an added cost by not doing it together, but you point that you're saving money in the long run too. And it seemed like in this case, because one of the questions I wanted to ask is there anything we could have done differently or something that we could do differently in the future to help increase the ability to time them together? And clearly there was, the issue with the water tower, that was a primary factor that led to not being able to get it in at the same time. But is there anything we could have done differently or might do differently in the future that would help have them in sync?
Yeah, and this year we did, that was the
Yeah.
plan until pretty late in the process, so we try to do that. And actually, we don't go to the bond market every year like the city does that every year. We do it, maybe every 3 to 4 years, but on those years, then we do try to make that process work.
Yeah, and so I would say that was the one question that came up, and it's been discussed in here, and I'd say that would be important to bring to the meeting, is to talk about, yes, there's the added cost, but there's also the benefit in the way that you're doing it.
Yeah, and delaying incurring that interest expense until you need the money is critical too. And as construction now in the sludge plant won't start until spring, so we don't need to have that money in October or November of this year and sit on it for 6 months either. So timing is important.
And I mean, as I'm sitting and listening to this, right, I'm not getting happy feelings here, right? If the utility is run and the budget for the utility is run through this commission, and if I hear that, somebody else says, well, maybe you should be using your reserves, well, thank you very much for the feedback, and we're going to look into that. But I would hope that this would not be standing in the way of this utility doing what it needs to do, because there's two ways to finance projects, right? Number one is through reserves, which we can get much lower, and the other one is through increases in rates, which we don't want to do. So I'm hoping everybody is keeping that in mind. Sorry, Deb.
Just to clarify, that's not what was discussed at the,
Okay.
So what was discussed at the commission meeting is what Nancy addressed in the packet here, is that there was when we were looking at our bonding packet, and then we were told that MPS was going to do one as well, but wasn't able to do it at the same time. We wanted to know, we had questions about what's the added cost, and would it have been better if we did it together? And so the conversation was limited to that, and it was, clearly you must have watched the video or something, so because it's discussed in the packet.
Just to clarify then, Nancy, here, as far as, I don't know if there's any value of delaying the payoff for a month additional interest on $7 million if you feel that the existing proposal wouldn't attract any better rates here, if that's what I think you had shared with.
I'm comfortable with the proposal that's in front of you, and our financial advisor is also.
Okay, so I wouldn't suggest then that we delay a month of interest expense because of maybe a better rate on the market with the advice from the financial planner or advisor that the product is sufficient to go to market.
And so we would be paying off the old stuff right away, right?
Well, it'll be about February 1st because you've got to do a call on it.
Yeah.
So it's either 30 or 45 days notice to those bondholders.
Yeah.
But, so it needs a council action, and then he can go ahead and do the 45-day call.
But the council action would not happen until the 9th anyway, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
to your point, we could go back and figure out whether the larger bond issue of 21 million would make a difference at all, because we don't have to make a decision here until the 3rd, still get it over to council on the 9th, and still be within the timeline, right?
Is that correct?
Is that correct?
Or you could approve it basically contingent on talking to the financial advisor, and then if we hear something different, we can bring it back on December 3rd.
Can I do that?
So approve it, and if if the financial advisor says, no, you're good to go, I wouldn't make any changes, then we just won't bring it back on the 3rd.
Are you guys comfortable with that? Chris?
Yeah. And how are you going to inform us of that, Bill?
Well, I'll have Nancy send me an email, and I'll send it to you.
All right. Very good.
Yep.
Okay. So then, anything else from Nancy? So if anybody would like to entertain a motion to put us further into debt? It's not a bad thing. It needs to be done.
So
It needs to be done.
we could give an attempt at this. So what I would like to propose a motion to approve the prepayment of the bonds and request a bond issuance of approximately $14 million after a review by staff to see if a advantage of combining the debt and the new bond issue for a better rate. If that is not found to be available, then continue the approval of item 14.
Does that make sense?
Watered, muddled?
No, I think that.
Try to restate it? You'll flush it and restate it for me?
Yeah, I think you said it right,
The short
because
version is we'll do as proposed unless the advisors tell us it would be better for us to combine the two into a $21 million offering and go to market with that, correct?
right.
See, that's, boom.
And,
You should have said it then.
yeah.
I can.
Well, and the big question he's going to ask us is, he's going to say, do you need that extra $7 million?
Well, we'd be paying back early, right?
Oh, and then pay it back early.
Pay back
Okay,
early.
I see,
Then-
I
then
see.
go to
Yep,
reserves. So if we get a better rate on the 21 million,
right.
that better rate, and then pay 7 million off faster out of the reserves.
Yep, we'll ask him that. And yeah, basically because he'll assess the risks and he'll tell us whether it's prudent or not. If it's not prudent, we'll just go on with what we've
And
proposed.
$7 million may not be a big deal in the market here for it, so
Yep,
it's a question.
Great idea. So we have a motion of some sort.
yep.
Is anybody going to say?
I would somehow second it.
It's a good thing. Any more discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. So we'll do whatever we said we're going to do. We do not go into executive session today, right?
Oh.
Our next meeting will be on the 3rd, and then on the 17th as well, correct? December 3rd and December 17th. So if anybody would like to entertain a motion to adjourn us?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we adjourn. Thank you, guys and women.